Greetings, I'm Reverend Due McCormick, Head Minister of En-Yuzan, Perfect Dragon Mountain, Shinganji, True Vow Temple, of the Nichiren Shu Sangha of the San Francisco Bay Area. In this presentation in 4 parts, it is my goal to cover those things about the teachings of Nichiren Shonin the Nichiren Shu clergy is expected to know. I feel that this might also be of interest to dedicated lay practitioners, as well as those who are curious about Nichiren Buddhism and would like to know more about its founder. In addition to the history and teachings of Nichiren Buddhism, I have also drawn upon materials from the 7-volume series Writings of Nichiren Shonin, published by the Nichiren Shu Overseas Propagation and Promotion Association. I will cite these volumes with the initials WNS, the volume number, and the page number of that volume. I also provide citations from corresponding passages, when there are any, in the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, which is in 2 volumes. I will cite these volumes with the initials WND and then the volume and page number. I cite these for the purpose of comparison with the Nichiren Shu translations and on those occasions when they provide the only English translation widely available. Much of the information in these presentations come from the following sources: the genealogical chart of the Buddha's lifetime teachings in 5 periods, which is in the WNS 3, pages 238 to 250. Also, the diagram of the 5 periods of the Buddha's lifetime teachings in WND 2, pages 238 to 243. And also the diagram of the 5 periods of the Buddha's lifetime teachings, though it's a different one, WND 2, pages 736 to 739, and the rooster diagram of the 5 periods of the Buddha's lifetime teachings, WND 2, pages 1035 to 1042. Also, a guide to the Tiantai Fourfold Teachings in Tiantai Lotus Texts, published by the Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai, pages 151 to 210. I will note that material appearing in dark red rather than black is material that is either not covered or not covered in detail in the book History and Teachings of Nichiren Buddhism, published by the Nichiren Shu Text Editorial Committee. This is material that I personally feel is important for Nichiren Buddhist practitioners to be familiar with, especially clergy and lay teachers. Now let's begin the first of the 4 parts. According to Zeiho Miwa in the History and Teachings of Nichiren Buddhism, Buddhism generally answers the following questions. The first is, what is our true nature? What we find when we look into our true nature is our egotism. So Buddhism helps us to know and overcome our egotism and realize our true nature, which is non-self, our selflessness. The second is, how are we to live in the right way? Here, Buddhism sets forth such teachings as the Eightfold Noble Path and the 6 perfections so that we can overcome egotism, realize non-self, and live in a selfless and compassionate manner that will end suffering and bring true happiness for ourselves and others. Nichiren Shonin, however, also asks, how can we make this a better world? Related to that question are 2 others. How should we act to bring about a better world for ourselves and others? This is the ethical question. What is the nature of our existence? In other words, will the nature of our existence even allow us to act so as to bring about a better world? This is the philosophical question. To find the answers to these questions, Nichiren Shonin trusted in the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. There was not anything that Nichiren Shonin taught that he did not believe were rooted in the true teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. As Zeiho Miwa says, in other words, Nichiren Shonin's teachings were the true teachings of the Buddha, which is in History and Teachings in Nichiren Buddhism, page 164. Oops. In the year 1260, Nichiren Shonin presented the treatise on spreading peace throughout the country by establishing the true Dharma, or the Risho Ankokuran, to the head of the Hojo clan, Hojo Tokiori, who was the actual ruler of the Kamakura shogunate that ruled Japan at that time. This was the first of his 5 major writings. In it, he declares the reason for his efforts to propagate the Lotus Sutra and its practice. He also exhorts the ruler of Japan to turn away from false teachings and to embrace the Lotus Sutra, not just for his own sake, but so that the Buddha's Pure Land can be established in Japan. in this world and in all worlds. Nichiren says, toward the end of it, you should promptly discard your false faith and take up the true and sole teaching of the Lotus Sutra at once. Then this triple world of the unenlightened will become Buddha lands. Will Buddha lands ever decay? All the worlds in the universe will become Pure Lands. Will Pure Lands ever be destroyed? When our country does not decay and the world is not destroyed, our bodies will be safe and our hearts tranquil. Believe these words and revere them. Based on this passage of the Risho and Kokuran, Zeiho Miwa asks the following questions and derives the following answers. How can we find security and peace in our mind? The answer is that we need to improve society. How can we improve society? We need to change the focus of our devotion. How can we change our focus of devotion? We need to know the transgressions we commit. How can we know our transgressions? We need to know our true Lord and his right teachings. If I might paraphrase these questions and answers, how can we find security and peace of mind? By creating a secure and peaceful society. How can we do that? By reevaluating what is of utmost importance to us, our ultimate concern and source of values. How can we do that? By reflecting upon how our current values and assumptions are falling short. And how can we do that? By measuring them in the light of a model of human existence and a teaching about human existence that does not fall short, and which can both embody our ideals, benefit others, and be put into actual practice in our own lives. Zeiho Miwa says, the answer to the last question realizes the doctrine of establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land, in Japanese, Risho Ankoku. This doctrine guides us to know ourselves, recognize our transgressions, convert our religion, and as a result, contribute to a better society. Thus we establish the Buddha's land where the safety of our bodies and the peacefulness of our minds are guaranteed. That is from The History and Teachings of Nichiren Buddhism, page 165. But why did Nichiren Shonin uphold the Lotus Sutra above all other teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha? To begin to understand Nichiren Shonin's way of evaluating various Buddhist teachings and teachers, we must understand that he was educated in the Tendai school, which was the Japanese version of the Tiantai school that was established in China by the great master Tiantai Jeri in the 6th century. Jeri had established a system of comparative classification of doctrines. In Japanese, this is called Kyohan, or Kyoso Hanjaku, by which to evaluate and create a unified system out of the various teachings and practices contained in the sutras, the Buddha's discourses, that had been translated in Chinese by the 6th century. Nichiren Shonin accepted this system because it seemed to him that it was corroborated by the statements of the Buddha found in the sutras themselves. I should mention that both Nichiren Shonin and Jeri accepted that the sutras were actually taught by Shakyamuni Buddha. The best place to start in understanding this system is with the 8 teachings. The 8 teachings refer to Great Master Tiantai's evaluation of the content of the sutras in terms of 4 doctrinal teachings and 4 methods of teaching. The 4 doctrinal teachings were the Tripitaka, or 3 baskets teaching, which refers to the 3 baskets or collections of the sutras, Vinaya, and Abhidharma. The Sutra basket collects the Buddha's discourses. The Vinaya basket collects the precepts for monks and nuns, and the Abhidharma basket collects the analysis and systematization of the other teachings. The Tripitaka teachings focuses on analysis of phenomena so that one can realize that all the things associated with the self are actually non-self, and thereby let go of the concept of self and attain nirvana, which is the extinction of greed, hatred, and delusion, the 3 poisons which cause suffering. It is primarily for voice hearers, those who hear the Buddha's voice and practice to become arhats, or worthy ones, who have attained nirvana and upon death will never suffer rebirth again. The shared teaching focuses on directly realizing that all phenomena are empty of a self-nature just as they are. They are empty even as they seem to manifest in our lives and as the elements of our lives. Realizing this, habitual clinging is cut off and ignorance about the true nature of reality is overcome. It is called the shared teaching because it is for both those who practice with a Hinayana mindset to attain nirvana for themselves, since Hinayana means small vehicle, and this would pertain to the voice hearers, and for those who practice with a Mahayana or great vehicle mindset to attain liberation for themselves and others, like the bodhisattvas who aspire to attain Buddhahood. The distinct teaching is for more advanced bodhisattvas. It focuses on realizing the middle way between being and non-being, and utilizing provisionally existent phenomena through skillful means in order to liberate others. The perfect teaching focuses on the unified truths of emptiness, provisional existence, and the middle way for those on the verge of attaining Buddhahood. The four methods of teaching have to do with how the four doctrinal teachings are presented. The sudden method presents the perfect teaching all at once without any preparation. The gradual method uses the Tripitaka, shared, and distinct teachings as needed to lead people to the perfect teaching. The secret method is when a single teaching can be understood as a sudden teaching or as one of the gradual teachings, but the hearers do not realize it is being understood differently by the others. The indeterminate method is when a single teaching is understood as sudden or gradual by different hearers who do realize that it is being understood differently by others. Great Master Tiantai then combined the various doctrinal teachings and their methods of presentation like ingredients to come up with 5 flavors of the Buddha's teachings over a period of 50 years. Note that the Great Perfection of Wisdom treatise attributed to Nagarjuna stated that the Buddha had left home at 19 and attained awakening at the age of 30, so that 50 years is the amount of time in which he taught until his final nirvana at age 80. In Nichiren Buddhism and in the Tendai school today, these 5 flavors are most often referred to as 5 periods. As stated in the translator's introduction to the Korean monk Chegwon's A Guide to the Tiantai Fourfold Teaching, the Japanese scholar Sekiguchi Shindai has demonstrated that the system of 5 periods used by Chegwon to organize Buddhist scriptures in terms of different periods of the Buddha's career was a later Tiantai development devised not by Jeri but by Zhanran. Instead, Jeri emphasized that the Buddha's teachings had many different shadings, which for the sake of convenience could be illustrated by the idea of 5 main flavors, based on the analogy of milk, cream, curds, butter, and ghee used in the Nirvana Sutra. This is from the Guide to the Fourfold Teachings, page 157 in Tiantai Lotus text. Note that Zhanran refers to the great master Miao Le, the 6th patriarch of the Tiantai school in China, whom Nichiren Shonin often cited as an authority, second only to his citations of great master Tiantai Jeri himself. Now, looking at these periods, the flower garland period is the first period, which spans the first week or 2 after Shakyamuni Buddha's awakening, during which the distinct and perfect teachings are combined. This is also said to be a time when the Buddha taught using the sudden method. This teaching, Great Master Tiantai said, was analogous to the flavor of milk. As Nichiren Shonin points out On the Opening of the Eyes, the Kaimokusho, the Flower Garland Sutra, in the Flower Garland Sutra, this period is named for, it is not so much the teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha, but the teaching of advanced cosmic bodhisattvas who gather to celebrate the Buddha's awakening. This statement can be found in WNS 2, pages 64 to 65, or WND 1, page 248. The Agama, or Deer Park period, referring to the Agamas, or Hinayana Sutras, or to the Deer Park where the Buddha first taught the Four Noble Truths, is a second period that spans the next 12 years, during which the Tripitaka teaching is the sole teaching presented, primarily to the voice hearers. This is said to be a time when the Buddha began using the gradual method, though he also resorted to the secret and indeterminate methods for those who could benefit from them. This teaching, Great Master Tiantai said, was analogous to the flavor of cream. This is the period in which the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path were taught for those following the voice hearer vehicle, and the 12-fold chain of dependent origination was taught, which is the teaching for those who wish to follow the vehicle for privately awakened ones who attain liberation from suffering on their own and do not teach others. These two are considered to be, the voice hearers and the privately awakened ones, to be the 2 vehicles of the Hinayana, or small vehicle Buddhism, for those who only seek to liberate themselves. The 6 perfections are also taught for those wishing to follow the Bodhisattva vehicle in order to attain Buddhahood, but the full implications of the Mahayana teaching are not yet presented. Today, the Pali Canon would be categorized as belonging to this period. The third and fourth periods span 30 years, though there are differences of opinion as to how long each of these two periods lasted. During these periods, the Buddha continued using the gradual method, while also using the secret or indeterminate methods, as needed. The expanded period is the third period, wherein the Tripitaka, shared, distinct, and pure teachings are all presented and contrasted with each other, primarily so that adherents of the two vehicles will aspire to become bodhisattvas, and the bodhisattvas will deepen their understanding and attain Buddhahood. This teaching, Great Master Tiantai said, was analogous to the flavor of curds. Sutras like the Vimalakirti Sutra and treatises such as the Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana could be said to fit into this period. The Prajna, short for Prajna Paramita, or Perfection Wisdom period, is the fourth period wherein the shared, distinct, and pure teachings are all included, so that bodhisattvas will continue their gradual progress to Buddhahood. This teaching, Great Master Tiantai said, was analogous to the flavor of butter. Teachings of this period can be found in abbreviated form in sutras, such as the Diamond Sutra or the Heart Sutra, and perhaps treatises such as Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, or Introduction to the Way of the Bodhisattva. The Lotus and Nirvana period is the fifth period, which spans the last 8 years of the Buddha's life, during which only the perfect teaching is taught, pure of any concessions to the limited viewpoints of the previous doctrinal teachings, though it also opens up and merges the previous teachings into the one true teaching. This period of teaching also transcends any of the four methods of teaching, being neither sudden nor gradual, neither secret nor indeterminate, since the pure teaching is not a means but the end of all the previous skillful means. This teaching, Great Master Tiantai said, was analogous to the flavor of ghee. As its name indicates, it is this period wherein the Lotus Sutra and the Nirvana Sutra are taught, with the Lotus Sutra being the teaching of the great gathering or harvest, wherein the Buddha revealed the doctrine that brought to flower the awakening of his disciples, and the Nirvana Sutra being the teaching of the gleaning, wherein those who did not comprehend the Lotus Sutra or who missed it were able to have one last chance to hear the Buddha's final teaching regarding the one vehicle, whereby all the Buddha's teachings lead to Buddhahood for all, and the purity, bliss, eternity, and true selfhood of the Buddha nature. The role of the Nirvana Sutra is held to be that of reiterating the Buddha's teachings and removing any obstacles to understanding the teachings that lead to Buddhahood. By Nichiren Shonin's time in Japan, there were 10 major schools of Buddhism. In his various diagrams of the Buddha's lifetime teachings in 5 periods, as well as in other works, Nichiren Shonin noted which sutras or treatises each of these schools used as their basis for teaching and practice, and which of the 5 periods these sutras and treatises belonged to. He also noted which teachers are considered the founders and most important thinkers of each school, but I will omit that for this presentation. The Flower Garland School, in Japanese the Keigan Shu, naturally enough is based on the Flower Garland Sutra of the Flower Garland period. It therefore combines the distinct and perfect teaching. The discipline, or precept school, in Japanese the Ritsu Shu, is based upon the 4-part discipline, a summary of the Vinaya of the pre-Mahayana Dharma-Guptaka school. As a pre-Mahayana Vinaya treatise, it is part of the Agama period, which teaches solely the Tripitaka teaching. The Abhidharma Treasury School, in Japanese the Kusha Shu, is based on Vasubandhu's summary of the pre-Mahayana Abhidharma called the Treasury of Abhidharma Treatise. As a pre-Mahayana Abhidharma treatise, it is part of the Agama period, which teaches solely the Tripitaka teaching. The Completion of Reality School, in Japanese Jojitsu Shu, is based on another Abhidharma work called the Completion of Reality Treatise by Harivarman. As a pre-Mahayana Abhidharma treatise, it is part of the Agama period, which teaches solely the Tripitaka teaching. The Dharma Characteristic School, or the Japanese Hoso Shu, is based on the Revealing the Profound's Secret Sutra, and several other sutras and treatises dealing with the concept that reality is a manifestation of consciousness only. Nichiren Shonin considered these sutras and treatises to belong to the expanded period. It therefore contrasts the 4 doctrinal teachings. The Zen school, in Japanese Zen Shu, is sometimes said to be based on the Lankavatara Sutra or other sutras such as the Diamond Sutra, or upon all the sutras, or none of them, because it is said to be a separate transmission outside the sutras. If Zen is based upon sutras like the Lankavatara Sutra, however, Nichiren Shonin considered these sutras to be part of the expanded period. It therefore contrasts the four doctrinal teachings. The Pure Land School, in Japanese Jodo Shu, is based upon three sutras: the Buddha of Infinite Life Sutra, the Contemplation of the Buddha of Infinite Life Sutra, and the Amitayus Buddha Sutra. Nichiren Shonin considered all of these to belong to the expanded period. It therefore contrasts the four doctrinal teachings. The Mantra School, in Japanese Shingon Shu, is also based on three sutras: the Mahavairochana Sutra, the Diamond Peak Sutra, and the Act of Perfection Sutra. Nichiren Shonin considered all of these to belong to the expanded period. It therefore contrasts the four doctrinal teachings. It should come as no surprise that the Three Treatises School, in Japanese Sanron Shu, is based upon three treatises: the Middle Way Treatise by Nagarjuna, the 12 Gates Treatise, also by Nagarjuna, and the 100-verse treatise by Aryadeva, Nagarjuna's disciple. Since these treatises were all explanations of the teaching of the Prajna or Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, Nichiren Shonin considered these teachings to belong to the Prajna period. It therefore includes the shared, distinct, and perfect teachings. Finally, the Tiantai School, or Japanese Tendai Shu, is based upon the Lotus Sutra, which of course aligns it with the Lotus and Nirvana period. It is the perfect teaching presented in a pure manner, free of defects or concessions. Zeiho Miwa sums all of this up, saying, Nichiren Shonin's classification was based on Tiantai's classification of the five periods. He extended it further to include various Japanese Buddhist schools of his time and the sutras on which they were based. Both Tiantai and Nichiren Shonin place the Lotus Sutra in the core of their doctrines. In this way, Nichiren Shonin concluded that the true teaching must be none other than the Lotus Sutra. It is from History and Teachings in Nichiren Buddhism, page 172. For Nichiren Shonin, however, it was not enough to simply accept the Tiantai teachings without question. He needed to see if it matched what Shakyamuni Buddha actually said in the sutras regarding what his most important teaching was. In this, he was following the teaching of the four alliances as found in the Nirvana Sutra. First is to rely on the Dharma, not upon the person. This means to rely on the Buddha Dharma expounded in the sutras rather than the opinions of the Buddhist masters in China and Japan. Nichiren Shonin considered this instruction fundamental if people were to understand the true intent of the Buddha's lifetime teachings correctly, and he quoted it often in his writings. Firmly upholding this standard is the Buddha's golden words. Nichiren Shonin came to the conclusion that when one honestly believes and accepts the words of the Buddha as stated in the sutras, then it will be clear that the Lotus Sutra expresses and is an expression of the true Dharma. Thus, according to Nichiren Shonin, rely on the Dharma means rely on the Lotus Sutra. He insisted that we should rely on the Lotus Sutra rather than the opinions of the various masters of the various schools of Buddhism. Next, rely on the meaning, not upon the words. This means to rely on the intent or true spirit of the words of the sutras and not just accept their literal meaning. One should rely on wisdom, not upon discriminative consciousness. In order to come to know the true intent of the words, we must rely on prajna or jnana, what we might call gnosis, rather than just discursive thinking, or in Sanskrit, vijnana, divided thinking. This does not mean to just go by intuition over logic and reason, but it does mean we need to primarily rely on direct observation of what is true and not by speculation or opinion or abstract reasoning. Through the direct observation of reality through Buddhist practice, we will be able to discern the real meaning of the Buddha's words in the sutras. And finally, rely on the Sutra of definitive meaning, not upon the Sutra of provisional meaning. To understand the Buddha's true intent, we must rely upon those sutras that do not need to be further interpreted and can be taken as a direct, straightforward, and definitive expression of the Buddha Dharma, in contrast to teachings that use skillful means that require further interpretation and cannot be taken literally as the final or definitive meaning of the Buddha Dharma. This translation of the Four Alliances is taken from the first volume of the Nirvana Sutra, translated by the Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai on pages 193 to 199, where they're explained on those pages. What Nichiren Shonin found when he searched the sutras were the following. These various teachings, employing the powers of my skillful means, have not yet, in these more than 40 years, fully revealed the truth. This is said by the Buddha in Chapter 2, the Infinite Meaning Sutra. You should generate great strength of faith in the teachings of the Buddha, for only after a long period of expounding them does the world-honored one fully reveal the truth. This is again said by the Buddha in Chapter 2 of the Lotus Sutra. But now, in the midst of bodhisattvas, gladly and without apprehension do I truly let go of skillful means to speak solely of the unsurpassable way, said by the Buddha in Chapter 2 of the Lotus Sutra. There are infinite thousands and millions of sutras that I have expounded. Some I have already expounded, some I am now expounding, and some I will expound in the future. Among them all, the most difficult to believe and hardest to understand is this Dharma Flower Sutra, by which is meant the Lotus Sutra, and this was spoken by the Buddha in Chapter 10 of the Lotus Sutra. TLS, by the way, is the threefold Lotus Sutra. Just as the Buddha is the king of the teachings, so is this sutra the king among the sutras, said by the Buddha in Chapter 23 of the Lotus Sutra. Oh. Whoops. Excuse me. There. These and other passages were enough to convince Nichiren and Shonin that the Lotus Sutra was the correct teaching. What is taught in the Lotus Sutra that so impressed Great Master Tiantai and Nichiren and Shonin? On the opening of the eyes, Nichiren says, "Now in my humble opinion, there are many differences between those scriptures expounded by the Buddha during the first 40 years or so, and those expounded during the last 8 years. However, what scholars consider to be the most important, with which I certainly agree, are the concepts of the attainment to Buddhahood by adherence of the two vehicles and the attainment to Buddhahood in the remotest past." This can be found in WNS 2, pages 37 to 38, and WND 1, page 226. In Great Master Tiantai's teaching, the first half of the Lotus Sutra is called the Trace Gate and is the teaching of the historical Shakyamuni Buddha to his major historical disciples, wherein he explains that all of his teachings are part of the one vehicle, that all lead to Buddhahood for all beings who hear them, take faith in them, and put them into practice, so that even those following the two vehicles of the voice hearers and privately awakened ones will someday attain Buddhahood. The second half of the Lotus Sutra is called the Original Gate and is the teaching of the original or eternal Shakyamuni Buddha, who reveals that his attainment of Buddhahood was not merely under the Bodhi tree some 40 years previously, but actually happened in the remotest past, which means that Buddhahood has no quantifiable beginning or end. Nichiren and Shonin link these two teachings with Great Master Tiantai's concept of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment, in Japanese Ichinen Sanzen. Again, On the Opening of the Eyes, he says, speaking of all the bodhisattvas present in Lotus Sutra, quote, "That is to say, they said that while listening to various Mahayana sutras as numerous as the grains of sand in the Ganges River, such as the Flower Garland Sutra, the Vaipulya or Expanded Sutras, the Prajna Sutras, the Revealing the Profound Secrets Sutra, and the Mahavairochana Sutra, they had never heard of the attainment to Buddhahood by adherence to the two vehicles, or the attainment to Buddhahood in the remotest past, the two doctrines that constitute the essential heart of Buddhism and the backbone of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment teaching." End quote. That is from WNS 2, page 68, and WND 1, page 251. Though the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment was taught by Great Master Tiantai, Nichiren and Shonin believed that it was hidden in the depths of Chapter 16 of the Lotus Sutra. Towards the beginning of On the Opening of the Eyes, he asserts, quote, "The 3,000 realms in a single thought moment doctrine is hidden in the depths of the 16th, the duration of the life of the Tathagata chapter, and the original gate of the Lotus Sutra. Although Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu were aware of it, they did not speak of it. It is only our Tiantai Jj who embraced it." GJ being another name for jury. This is in WNS 2, page 34 to 35, and WND 1, page 224. What exactly is Great Master Tiantai's teaching of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment? It is described in the Great Calming and Contemplation by Juri, who maintained that the 3,000 realms of existence are contained in every single thought moment of an ordinary sentient being at any given moment. Nichiren Shonin's On the Contemplation of the Mind and the Focus of Devotion, Kanjin Hanzan Sho, opens by citing Great Master Tiantai's explanation and offering his own particular way of understanding and applying this concept. I will not quote that, but you can find it in WNS2, pages 127 to 137, and WND1, pages 354 to 359. In brief, the number 3000 is arrived at in the following way. In Buddhism, there are 6 realms of rebirth. The first 3 are the realms of hell dwellers, those primarily consumed by hatred and rage, hungry ghosts, those consumed by greed, and animals, those who are thoughtless and act without thought of consequences. These 3 lowest realms are for those who commit varying degrees of unwholesome actions of body, speech, and mind. The higher 3 of the 6 are the realms of the Asuras, or fighting demons, who are arrogant and contentious, humans, who are capable of being rational and benevolent, and gods, who are benevolent and among the higher gods have cultivated states of deep meditative absorption. These 3 are for those who commit varying degrees of wholesome actions of body, speech, and mind. Note that the hell dwellers and gods are not eternal states of being, though they are said to last for millions or even billions of years. Also, note that the Asuras are sometimes considered a lower realm and sometimes a higher realm, but even when considered virtuous, they are tainted by self-serving ulterior motives and pride. These 6 realms can be interpreted as actual states of being that one can be reborn as, or, as Nichiren Shonin did in On the Contemplation of the Mind and the Focus of Devotion, they can be related to as states of mind that human beings fall into throughout life. In addition to these 6 realms of rebirth, there are 4 noble states, or realms of varying degrees of awakening and liberation. These 4 higher realms are of the voice hearers, who hear and practice Buddhism to become arhats and escape rebirth. Among the 6 lower realms, the privately awakened ones who contemplate impermanence and interdependence and also escape rebirth. The bodhisattvas who aspire to Buddhahood and continue to be reborn out of compassion and to accrue merit and wisdom, and the Buddhas who have attained unsurpassed perfect and complete awakening. The 6 realms of rebirth and the 4 higher realms of awakening together are the 10 realms. Each of these 10 realms manifests in accordance with the 10 suchnesses of all phenomena taught in the second expedience chapter of the Lotus Sutra. This means each has a certain external appearance, inward nature, and entity combining internal and external relations. Each has a particular potential power and mode of activity. Each is a cause and or a condition for future effects and recompenses, and each is an effect and or a recompense of past causes and conditions. Each has a beginning and end ultimately equal in terms of all these suchnesses being equally empty of self-nature, provisionally existent, and expressive of the middle way beyond the extremes of being and non-being. Great Master Tiantai taught that these 10 realms mutually possess one another, because they are not fixed and independent existences. Since each realm is composed of the 10 suchnesses, each realm is causally related to the others. As causes and conditions change, effects and recompense change, and so on. This means that every realm embraces and is embraced by the others in different ways. The lower realms, for instance, all contain the realms of Buddhahood as a seed or potential for awakening, while the realm of Buddhahood contains the lower realms as a focus of compassionate understanding and a field for spontaneous liberating activity. Multiplying the 10 realms by the 10 realms and by the 10 suchnesses that they all hold in common results in 1,000 realms. These are further multiplied by the 3 categories of the 5 aggregates, sentient beings, and their environments. In other words, the 1,000 realms operate in terms of the 5 aggregates of forms, feelings, perceptions, volitions, and consciousnesses of all sentient beings, in terms of sentient beings as provisionally whole entities, and in terms of the environments of those sentient beings. The 1,000 realms are manifest on all these levels, and not just internally, or only for sentient beings, or only as external circumstances. Juri taught that in every moment of conscious awareness, all of these realms are present and at work in various configurations. As it is shown that the 3,000 realms are included in an individual's every thought moment, and therefore at least potentially accessible, it follows that practitioners of the 2 vehicles, who have been denied the possibility that they can attain Buddhahood in the prior teachings, as well as ordinary people, can enter the world of Buddhahood attained by the Buddha after all. Nichiren Shonin distinguishes between the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment in terms of principle and in terms of actuality. By principle, he meant something that we can discern in our minds in a state of contemplative meditation. And by actuality, he meant something expressed actively in the world. He taught that the practice of chanting the Odaimoku is the actuality of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment, in contrast to contemplating it in silent meditation. Of this contrast between the principle and actuality of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment, Nichiren wrote in a response to the lay priest Lord Toki, or a treatise on healing sickness, Japanese Toki Nyudo Dono Gohenji, Chibyo Sho, quote, "There are two ways of observing the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. One is in terms of principle. The second is in terms of the actual phenomena. At the time of Tiantai and Dengyo and so on, it was observed in principle. Now it is observed in actual phenomena. Since the latter form of contemplation is superior, the greater difficulties accompanying it are also superior. The former is the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of the provisional teaching of the Lotus Sutra, and the latter is the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of the original teaching of the Lotus Sutra. They are as different as heaven and earth, and at the time of death you should keep this in mind." This is from WNS2, page 257, although I have adapted it a bit, and WND1, pages 1114 to 1115. Why did he say that the principle of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment is of the provisional teaching, or the trace gate, while actuality is of the original gate? In the trace gate, Buddhahood is something that is promised in the future as a result of following the one vehicle. So in theory, we are Buddhas, but the actuality of attaining Buddhahood is for another time and place. In the original gate, the Buddha reveals that Buddhahood has no beginning or end, no coming or going, no self or other. It is something actualized right here in the present moment, in the very act of sowing the seed of Buddhahood through the practice of Odaimoku. With that, I bring the first part of this four-part presentation of the teachings in Nichiren Shonin to a close. I hope that this presentation was helpful and informative and will help to enrich your faith in and practice of Nichiren Buddhism.